Right. Hello. Good afternoon. Who here has heard of or has used OpenTelemetry Tracing before? Heard of. Okay. And one oh, from me. Okay. All right. Right. I will introduce OpenTelemetry Tracing and then talk a bit about what we're doing with it. What I'm presenting is very early work. Some of it is in released software, but in quite beta preliminary form, and some of it is not released at all yet. Statistics. We all have statistics. We have pretty graphs that tell stories about what's happening on our networks, in our infrastructure. They don't tell you everything. Sometimes you want to drill down a bit more. And that's where something like OpenTelemetry tracing might come in. In OpenTelemetry tracing, a process like the resolving of a name on behalf of a user is plotted in a trace for the full resolve process. And within that trace, you have spans, and you might have the the lookup bit might do a few outgoing queries, and each of those queries is a span, so that you might be able to see this question to this authoritative took 300 milliseconds, then this one took 200 for a total of 500. And that way you will be able to get a nice overview of where your time is being spent. If you look at this tree on the screen, you'll see that there's recursiveness to it. Each span has a parent and 0 or more children. A more useful look at things might be a more time-oriented view, where you can see how much time things took, where you see that most of the time spent in span A was spent inside span B and D, etc., as part of some resolving process or some other process. These spans have many representations. JSON is a nice and readable one. So here we have a trace, which is the full resolve process again. We have a span inside that, so one step of the process, which has a parent span, meaning it's part of some other slightly bigger process. You have a name for whatever part of your software is doing something, timestamps, and some extra data. And then if you put all of that together and put it into a nice visualization tool, you might get something like this. So at the very top, you see a bunch of lines quite close together with like a stair walking down, and these are subsequent tasks happening after each other, each taking about the same time. And I'm not sure it's all readable, but the first chunk of the screen is we get a query, we process it. These are the very, very small timelines in microseconds. We parse the packet, we do a cache check without talking to the network. So these things are quick. Then we go into what we call the sync rest, the synchronous resolver. It's an implementation detail. And this one has to go talk to the network. And there you see we do a query, 40 milliseconds, another query, 40 milliseconds. Next one takes 150 milliseconds. And all these things happen sequentially in at least our resolver implementation. And of course, we always had log files with these traces, and all implementations have log files with these traces. These can be hard to read, and we feel that this representation might be more useful for some people. The tool you see here is called Jaeger. We didn't write it. It's a tool from the OpenTelemetry organization or whatever. We just sent protobuf encoded OpenTelemetry trace data, and Jaeger interprets it. So this is fun, this is cool, but you don't have a single recursor resolver in your network. You have multiple components. So this is a demonstration, and if you look closely at the top, you see that the top span is not covering the entire thing. That's currently a bug. But what we have here is DNS-dist taking in a query, doing some processing on it, and then it assigns the outgoing query to a backend. And at that moment, the recursor also starts tracing for the same trace, because DNS-dist is passing along a trace ID to the recursor. And if your recursor is then talking to an authoritative, it might pass IDs on to that authoritative as well, because I know some of you have deployments that go 3, 4, 5 levels deep in such a way. Right, so for logging, we don't emit the OpenTelemetry protobuf objects directly today. We already had our own protobuf logging thing, which is kind of like DNS step, but different. So we added a field to that. And in that, we put the OpenTelemetry data. But similarly, if you're already emitting DNS step, there's an extra field in DNS step that you could use for this, or we could decide altogether the DNS step grows a new field dedicated to OpenTelemetry. That's something to decide. And of course, you could decide to emit OpenTelemetry directly to an OpenTelemetry receiver, because if you put it in a protobuf or a DNS step like we did, you will need an extra component to extract the trace data and then send it to Jaeger or some other receiver. As for how to connect these things together, we defined an EDNS option that allows, in this case, DNS dist to pass the trace ID and span ID optionally to the recursor. This might not work for everybody. EDNS options break TSIG if you're passing things on from other people. And also they might have a risk of escaping your organization. So I've been talking to a couple of people who already are doing things like this, and they all came to the same conclusion that I did. If you're doing proxy protocol, you can put it in the proxy protocol header as a TLV, which lives outside of TSIG and is automatically a nice boundary for your organization. Non-DNS protocols often put these things in HTTP headers. I've been wondering if we can put this in TLS handshakes, except then they become per connection. But these are conversations to be had as far as I'm concerned. This EDNS option code will need a number assigned from IANA. Our current plan is to write a good document, which we've started on, give this a stable place, maybe in the data tracker at IETF, maybe somewhere else, and get a number assigned. We do not currently intend to go through the whole RFC process for this, because IANA doesn't require it, and OpenTelemetry is not an IETF standard anyway. So we figured that might be good enough. Any questions? Thomas.
Tamás PCH. So one thing which wasn't clear to me that in the visualization you somehow connected events together. It wasn't clear to me like what was the relation. These were just like subsequent queries arriving to the server, or there were some relationship between
You mean
them?
in this one?
Yes.
Yeah, the two stairs you see at the bottom, actually it's one stair, but one is folded out. These are outgoing queries from the recursor to different authorities on the internet.
Okay, I see now.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
the unfolded one is for HubSpot.net. So quite obviously to me, because I know what's happening here. First one is root, second one is TLD, etc.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Oh, there's a queue.
Yeah.
Benno.
Hi, Benno Overeiner and Nalnet Labs. So thanks for presenting this. I understand you don't want to go through the IGF process, but how do you envision the peer process? So getting input, improve the draft.
We've had input from one Cloudflare employee because
Yeah.
he has a lot of experience with this, and I have been talking to some of you, and I will do more of that.
So the
Before we-
OARC could be a place for.
I'll probably use
collect
the ORG
interest
chat
and-
for that in
Yeah.
there are a couple of suitable channels there.
And RIPE maybe or so. Well.
Yeah, maybe it's not a complicated document. It's not.
Yeah.
Let me bring it up.
Okay.
It's not a complicated thing. So
Okay.
agreeing on just this bit because that's important.
Yeah.
Should not be too hard.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm not that Cloudflare person. You're talking to a different Cloudflare.
Correct.
Okay, good. So I forget things sometimes, you know. So I may have missed this, but you were talking towards the end when I woke up about this being something that exists within the scope of, for example, a single organization or a single connected set of infrastructure operated by a single person, that sort of thing, and not intended for telemetry between different servers. So, for example, getting telemetry back from a remote authority server as part of the lookup process is not part of this.
So doing this cross organization would
Yeah.
be by agreement, and getting data actual telemetry data back from a remote is not currently covered by this EDNS option, no. And I don't think you would want whole OpenTelemetry objects to go live in EDNS options and responses.
No, that maybe is not the best part of it. But I wondered if you'd thought what it would take to make this more general, so that you could, without having bilateral arrangements ahead of time with particular operators, where you could potentially collect interesting information that didn't contain private information and wasn't sensitive and things like that, but could be useful.
Right. One problem is doing this telemetry is not free.
Yeah.
It's actually quite expensive, I think. We don't have numbers of ourselves, but I've heard from others that do similar things that it can easily be 20, 30% of overhead in mostly generating the actual objects. The measuring is not hard. You just take a few timestamps, but then you need to describe this and send it somewhere, and that is not free. As for getting telemetry data back from a remote in some useful way, all I have here is the way for you to tell the other end, this is the ID I want you to use for that or tie it to. And the actual collection would have to be some other conversation.
Yeah.
That might be complex enough to take to IETF.
Klaus Aurelian, Nick.at. I wonder, have you also implemented it for the authoritative PowerDNS, or is it actually useful there?
It is very useful there, more so than for other authoritative DNS servers, because something like NSD, it has the zone data in memory, spends a few CPU microseconds, has a packet, while PowerDNS might have to talk to a database, which in fact is super suitable for this same view. Instead of recursor talking to an out, it's the out talking to a database. So yes, that is planned.
Planned, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Shane Kerr, IBM. We talked about this a little bit. Actually, regarding the last comment, I think for any authoritative server it can be useful if an organization wants to track how their authoritative server fits in some other process.
True. And I just realized something like NSIG3 might take CPU time.
Also.
Yeah.
And I want to put my money down on the idea of using the proxy protocol to transmit this information instead of an EDNS option for the reasons that you've discussed, having to recompute TSIG or something like that.
Yeah.
Pulling packets apart and putting them together is very expensive. And you mentioned that you don't really have numbers, but that was actually the reason I got up to the microphone was to ask if you'd looked at the performance implications of this at all. Because we're thinking about it, but it's going to have to be sampling, I guess.
Sampling or
Errors
I've seen somebody from an organization much like yours demonstrate to me that they can send a query in with a tag that says, give me full tracing for this one. And then a few seconds later, they have that.
Definitely.
Those are fun things to do.
Yeah.
You could actually use this EDNS option, just put all zeros in it and have it mean, go trace, invent an ID for me.
That's interesting, although the security implications seem scary with
Yeah, you will have to ACL that or whatever, or indeed tie it into proxy, but those are things to consider.
Anyway, very cool stuff. Good luck going forward.
Thank you.
All right. Any more questions? That's it. Thanks a lot, Peter.
Thank you.